am the Story Girl, and welcome to the story of the Snow Queen, Part 4, The Robber Girl, and Other Fine Ladies. Gerda could hardly believe what was happening. The coachman, all the servants who had been brought with her, all of the people in the shining coach, dead. Her raven friend, in a panic, flew away through the trees, cawing and cawing and cawing. And the robbers, with their greasy hair and their dark eyes, crept towards her.
Oh, and who could this be? She looks pretty tender.
It was the leader of the robbers, a wicked-looking woman with a grizzled beard upon her chin.
She'll make a fine meal.
Ouch! This last part was said because the leader of the robbers happened to be carrying her own daughter on her back, a little robber girl who at that very moment had bit her mother right on the ear. Ow! What did you do that for? She will be with me, said the little robber girl. She will be my friend and she will love me. Well, the robber girl thought this because she thought everyone loved her. She was always given exactly what she wanted, and even though her mother was the leader of the robbers, she was the true leader of the robber band. I insist I will ride in that golden coach and she will give me her muff. Well, there was much hemming and hawing from the other robbers, but they were all pretty afraid of the robber girl, and so they did as she wished. The little robber girl went up inside the golden coach and took Gerda's muff and sat down beside her. Little girl, you are now my little girl, and you will live with me and sleep in my bedroom, and we will always be happy. Gerda didn't know what to say. There were tears running out of her cheeks, but she did her best. She did her best to keep her head about her. Now, tell me who you are. You are obviously a princess. Gerda explained that she was not a princess. No, indeed, she, in fact, was just a little girl looking for her friend. As the golden coach rumbled along, now being driven by the robbers who were all around, Gerda told her all about little Kay and the river and the sugar cookies and the raven and the golden castle. And the robber girl looked at her. What a strange story. What a stupid girl you are. You're telling me that you had the chance to live in a beautiful cottage with beautiful flowers and a beautiful castle, and you said no? Why? Gerda lifted her chin. I have to find Kay. I have to make sure he's all right. Well, what did Kay ever do for you? He's my friend, and I love him. At these words, Gerda began to glow with the warmth of her heart, and the warmth touched the icy cold exterior of the robber girl. I still think you're weird, said the robber girl. As she said this, the robbers had pulled up to their very own robber castle, which was an old castle that had been left in the forest many, many, many centuries before and was all crumbly and moldy, but it was a fine place for a band of robbers to stay. The robber girl jerked Gerda's hand forward and pulled her along to her own little corner of the main hall. In the center of the main hall, there was a large bonfire with many roasted meats turning on many spits, and many robbers laying about with bottles in hand. The little robber girl pulled aside a sheet and showed Gerda a little bed, just big enough for the little robber girl and maybe one other person, but the room was also full of birds. Birds on perches, birds on the windowsill, a few birds that seemed to be locked inside of strong boxes. Oh, yes, said the robber girl. I cannot let them out. If I did, then they would surely fly away. And she picked up one of the birds and kissed it on the head. Mwah! They are my pets and I love them. And she threw the bird away. But my favorite is over there. She pointed to a corner of her little nook where was chained a very tired, very sad-looking reindeer. Oh, yes, this little reindeer is my favorite, aren't you, sweetie? Said the robber girl, and she pulled out a knife from her waist. My favorite game is to tickle him around the neck with my knife. And as she tickled him with her knife, he jumped and began to pull at the chain that was tying him to the wall. Laughed the robber girl, fit to burst, but Gerda's eyes were wide. Would she spend the rest of her life with this girl? With these people? How would she get away? How would she find Kay? Now, said the little robber girl, you will sit here on my bed and tell me all the reasons why this Kay is so wonderful. To tell all about how bright he was, how he knew all the times tables, and then she had to explain what times tables were, for the robber girl had never learned even her numbers or letters. The robber girl just sat, her head to one side, listening and nodding. That night, as they were preparing for bed, the robber girl perked up her head and said, Girl, why must you always hum? Hum? Said Gerda, quickly stopping. Yes, you've been humming this whole time. I can feel it. I can feel your humming. It's very warm. Where did you learn that song? Don't you know it? Said Gerda. The robber girl narrowed her eyes. Are you calling me stupid? No, said Gerda. It's just that it's the song I hear every day. The song of the sun and the sunshine, the song that I hear coming down from the sun. Have you never heard it? The robber girl narrowed her eyes, but this time contemplating, thinking, listening. No. Yes, maybe. But for now, it's time for bed. And she laid her knife down on the bed in between her and Gerda, and the robber girl fell quite asleep. Gerda wished she didn't have to sleep next to a knife, and knew that she wouldn't sleep at all this night. She looked up at the birds perching above her head and whispered, Where is Kay? Where is he? We know, came a voice. We know. Who's there? Said Gerda, imagining some strange robber. There were shadows on the walls of the robbers who were at this moment telling strange tales and doing somersaults through the great hall. This voice didn't sound like a robber's voice. Soft winds brushed her face as one of the doves that were perched above landed lightly beside Gerda's head. I have seen him. I know that there are a lot of boys with golden hair, said Gerda. I'm sure it must not. No, it is him. Last winter, we saw the strangest thing, my sisters and I. We were just little hatchling birds, barely out of our eggs, when a cruel frost ran over top of us. Killed all my sisters except for me and the one perched above. And I saw, flying above us, the white sleigh of the Snow Queen, flying north, and sitting beside her was a little boy who we heard her call Kay. The Snow Queen. The Snow Queen has Kay? Probably in her castle, right now. She might be in her summer home, in Lapland. The reindeer there would know more about that. but I'm sure it was Kay. There was a chicken flying next to the sleigh, pulling his little sled. I'm sure it was him. Gerda thanked the bird and ran all these words through her head and began to rustle so much that the robber girl poked up her head and said, "Move again and I'll tickle you with my knife." She curled up and held as still as possible till the next morning's sun started to rise and the pale light gleaming through the dark trees. The robber girl sat up quite abruptly and looked down at Gerda and said, "I heard everything that happened last night. Reindeer, do you think that you know where you can find Lapland? Do you think you can know where you can find Lapland and this girl's little boy?" "I'm sure I can," said the musty voice of the reindeer. "Of course I can, for I was born and raised in Lapland. That is where the most beautiful ice and snow blows all around, where you can run and be free and never have to fear a little girl's prick of a dagger." The little robber girl turned to Gerda and said, "You could stay here, you know. I would make sure that no one would ever harm you again. You could have whatever you wanted. But since you were so stupid as to give up living in a golden castle, I can't imagine you'd want to live here. So I will set you free. Just wait until my mother falls asleep." By this time, most of the robber band had gone to comb through the forest looking for travelers who had jewels on them, but the robber girl's mother was sitting poking the fire. The robber girl ran over to her mother and tugged at her mother's beard, and her mother laughed and slapped her on the behind, which was, in the language of robbers, love. Soon, the leader of the robbers took a sip out of the bottle and fell fast into her morning nap. And the little robber girl came over and said to Gerda, "Now." She put Gerda's little boots on Gerda's feet and wrapped her warm coat around her and cut the chain holding the reindeer. The reindeer was so happy to be free, he leapt up and down. "Quiet," said the robber girl. "We must not be seen." She turned to Gerda and said, "I hope I see you again, girl. I hope I do. I'm going to keep your muff, for it is so nice, but you can have my mother's mittens. Can't have you catching a cold." And she slipped the warm mittens onto Gerda's hands and helped Gerda up onto the reindeer with a few packages of food. With another jangle of hooves, the reindeer was off, running as fast as he could away from the robbers, away from the forest, and to the Northlands. To the Northland. Faster and faster, and the further they got, the colder and colder it became. Gerda munched on the food that had been provided by the robber girl, and the reindeer kept running. Running and running and running for the joy of running, for the joy of freedom. Gerda had fallen asleep on his back. It was such a long journey and so cold. He spied a little tent, a bit of a crooked tent, far, far ahead of them. He ran towards it, for he knew that Gerda needed somewhere warm to stay, and tapped on the flap. The flap opened, and out stepped a very old woman. "You're a reindeer?" she said. "Yes, madam, and as you can see, I have a girl on my back who is needing food and shelter." Well, the reindeer told her the whole story. The reindeer told her the whole story, starting with his own part, of course, for he thought that was the more important. And the woman waved him inside with his little bundle of Gerda, bundled her off her back. "She can sleep there for the night." And the old woman went back to what she had been doing, which had been roasting fish over the fire. Roasting one, and then another, and then another. With the smell of fish that woke Gerda, she opened her eyes. Oh, good evening, or morning." "It's morning," said the woman abruptly, still roasting the fish. Gerda crept up and said, "Hello, I'm Gerda. I'm called the Lap Woman. You're in Lapland." Reindeer tells me that you're on your way to visit the Snow Queen. Wouldn't do it if I were you. She's not very nice, that Snow Queen, you know. Look at the snow around here. Look how hard it is. You should get back on that reindeer and go back to wherever you came from. Of course you won't. I don't know the whole story. Well, if you insist on going on, you'll need to go so much further north that it'll feel like it freezes your blood. Are you willing to go? Why, yes, of course you are, said the woman. I'll send you along to the Finn woman. She'll be able to give you more instructions. And with that, the Lapp woman, for she had no paper to spare, wrote a note to the Finn woman on the outside of one of the fish, pulled the fish, handed it to Gerda. Give that to her when you see her. She lives north. Just go north. You'll see her house. More of a chimney, really. You'll see it. Go. And Gerda was so startled she jumped onto the reindeer's back, and the reindeer took off as fast as he ever had before, running and running and running and running. And the ice began to be taller. The snow drifts as high as mountains. Gerda had never seen such snow in all her life, and as they ran, she clutched the fish to her chest, hoping that they would be able to reach Kay in time. Finally, they arrived at what looked like a chimney. A chimney rising up out of the snow. It didn't appear to be a door, so Gerda went and tapped on the chimney. Out of the top of the chimney popped the head of a woman. Come in, said a raspy voice. Come, come, come. And with that, Gerda and the reindeer jumped down into the chimney. Down, 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 where there was an enormous fire blazing. They missed the fire, of course. And Gerda stood up. Are you the Finn woman? Said Gerda. The woman nodded. Gerda handed her the fish. The woman read the fish through. Read it twice. Read it 3 times. Read it until she had memorized every word that was on the fish and slipped it into her stew pot, for she never wasted anything, and the fish was good food. Gerda stood in the corner, but she was sweating. It was so warm. The fire was so blazing. The house was so full of heat she could barely stand it. The Finn woman hobbled over and undid Gerda's coat and took off her boots and mittens so that she would not be too warm, and placed a chunk of ice on top of the reindeer's head. The woman didn't say another word. She stirred her stew pot and took a book off the shelf and started to read. The reindeer and Gerda looked at each other, looked back at the Finn woman. They thought she would be able to help, but the Finn woman just sat and read her book. Read and read and read for what felt like hours, until Gerda had fallen asleep in the corner. The reindeer came over, and the woman put a fresh chunk of ice on his head. Please, Finn woman, said the reindeer, I know who you are. I know you are a woman of great power, that you hold the wind in your hands. Surely, isn't there some way you can help this little girl? The woman snapped her book closed. There's no one who can help her. No one. No one. She has everything she needs. The woman pointed at the sleeping form of Gerda. Do you not see how every person she meets is warmed by her presence, even the hardest of people? She is a child of the sun, and you mock me. She must find the other before it is too late. You must take her to the Snow Queen's garden. The northern lands are as far north as you can ride. Take her to the bush with the frozen red berries on it. Leave her there and come back to me. She will do very well on her own. And with that, The Finn woman clapped her hands together, and Gerda opened her eyes so startled. The Finn woman bundled Gerda onto the back of the reindeer, and the reindeer jumped through the chimney and started to run as fast as he could. No, no, my mittens, my boots! Gerda called out, but it was too late. Her feet and hands were bare. She bundled her coat about her as fast as she could, and soon she saw ahead of them a large bush with red berries on it. I'm sorry, said the reindeer. The Finn woman said I must leave you here alone. Gerda slid off his back and gave his muzzle a little kiss. You've been wonderful, said she. He nuzzled her head, turned around, and sped off back the direction he had come. Gerda turned around and saw in front of her a large stretch of white snow and rock, frozen solid in the ice. The wind blew hard against her skirts and against her coat, and her poor little feet were frozen in the snow. She took a step. She began to hum as she stepped. She felt the pain, a searing pain across her feet as the cold broke through her skin and little drops of blood sank into the snow. But dear little Gerda, her blood was full of the warmth of the sun and melted the snow at each step she took and kept her feet from being too cold. As she stepped forward, she saw, racing towards her, was a great flurry of snow, but it didn't look like snowflakes, not like beautiful, perfect little flowers. Oh no, it took the shape of great leering wolves and bears and monstrous swarms coming towards her to defend the castle. Gerda hummed as loudly as she could, and the breath that came out of her mouth from her humming transformed into great winged warriors who flew in front of her and guarded her against the evil beasts that were coming towards her, fighting a ferocious battle. The ice could not stand against the warm, golden winged warriors that now picked Gerda up and flew her forward, set her on the doorstep of a great ice castle, and vanished. Gerda looked around, looked up at the tall, beautiful ice castle, and wondered where Kay could be at this very moment. He was inside the castle, of course, not dreaming that his friend Gerda stood right outside. There is more to come. Join me next week for The Snow Queen, Part 5. The Finn woman said that Gerda was powerful enough to complete her quest. What do you think? Is Gerda strong enough? Are you strong enough to complete your quest? Remember, you are the main character of your story. I am the Story Girl. Thank you for joining the story today. I'll see you next time. Bye.